I hate this movie. I really don't even think that I need to say anything more about it than those simple words, because literally speaking, there are really only two modes that you can be when it comes to this movie. You either loved it or you hated it. If you hated it, you're probably a fan of the Star Wars franchise and actually are willing to see the flaws that this movie had and feel insulted by everything that this movie did to destroy the legacy that this franchise once enjoyed and had sustained for over the last 40 years. If you liked it, you're nothing more than a fucking liar who is living in a delusion. You want to basically pretend like you like this movie because it's filled with progressive politics and you want a virtue signal about how good, squeaky clean, and virtuous you are. Yeah, well, guess what? We're entering into a new decade now, and a lot of people are finally realizing that shit isn't gonna work anymore. We're seeing through your bullshit. So actually start getting behind something, or just shut the fuck up. Okay. I'm gonna admit, you guys, this has been a long time coming. I actually chose not to make videos regarding The Last Jedi when it was first coming out because, effectively speaking, that could have made my entire channel. I wanted to focus on basically like doing playthroughs of video games and doing things that made me happy and not focusing on things that irritated me all the time. Plus, I wanted this channel to be more oriented towards Jurassic Park and Godzilla. Even though I love Star Wars, I basically just really didn't want to necessarily get too in-depth with Star Wars now that Disney had taken over. But I honestly could have. I could have made several videos in regards to The Last Jedi, but I saw that other people were basically doing the same thing and making their channels grow because of it, and for some reason, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be known as just another guy that basically, got popular hating on The Last Jedi, even though it's completely warranted to hate on this piece of garbage film. I gotta admit that basically when I started this retrospective, this little rambly rant review of Disney Star Wars, this was going to be one of the big videos that I had to make. In fact, I took all of yesterday off because I didn't want to do this video. But I gotta do it. I gotta do it if I want to finish off this series and finally talk about the rise of Shillwalker or the fall of Skywalker, whatever we want to call it. That's probably one of the worst parts about it. We can't agree on what derogative name we can call this stuff. As soon as I left the theater of this movie, I knew we were going to be calling it The Last Straw, because this movie was the turning point. Whatever goodwill J.J. Abrams had bought with his flashy, spectacle-driven remake of A New Hope, all of that goodwill was now decimated, completely destroyed by this movie. This was the last straw that that broke the camel's back. This is what made the fan base that had loved J.J. Abrams' derivative tripe turn against the franchise. No, not against the franchise, against Disney, who ruined the franchise. So, I've got a lot to say about this movie, and it's so ironic because I thought that I had a lot to say about The Farce Awakens, but I couldn't actually articulate it. I needed to think really hard about forcing myself to talk about this movie. This one, however, the gloves are off. I basically know everything that I want to talk about this movie and why it doesn't work, and basically speaking, I've been upset that I haven't been able to keep these videos within an hour length. This one, nuh-uh. I know that this video is probably going to be the longest out of all of them, because there's just so much to talk about with how badly this movie fucks up. Because this movie doesn't just fuck up itself, it retroactively makes its predecessor worse, and worst of all, it tries, and somewhat succeeds, to try and diminish the movies that had preceded it. That's how bad this movie is. This movie is literally a poison that tries to destroy the continuity of the entire Star Wars franchise. And you get the sense that that's what it was trying to do, especially when you get the comments made by, quote, writer and director of this movie. I honestly don't think that the man who is responsible for this is even qualified to be called either of those things. So, I'm just gonna basically put it out there for you folks. One of Disney's biggest problems when it comes to doing these movies is that Disney has absolutely no patience. Disney thinks that because they have a whole lot of money, they can just rush the creative process as quickly as possible, and everything that they make will be quality. Or maybe it doesn't even matter if what they make is quality, because they know people are going to see it regardless, because they're Disney. It's like you'd have to be insane to ignore things that Disney does, right? Wrong. You'd have to be a completely reasonable human being to ignore everything that Disney does. Because Disney gave up on quality a long time ago. Basically speaking, ever since Michael Eisner became CEO, Disney quality has basically been left in the garbage, and Bobby Iger's tenure as president has only made it worse. Iger basically turned Disney into every single stereotype people thought that it was going to be under Eisner. So, Iger and Eisner, how funny. Every single stereotype about Disney just being a money-grubbing evil corporation that wants to buy up the entire world. Now people are legitimately thinking that Disney will one day become so powerful that it will become, in and of itself, its own nation, and that one day it will have enough money to buy up the United States. And I think that if the Democrats get back into power, that might actually become a realistic possibility. But anyways, sorry for basically bringing politics into this so early, but we all knew that politics was going to be a part of this movie to begin with. A part of this video to begin with, because they started it. But what was the point that I was trying to make? Because Disney lacks any sort of patience, they rushed this entire process. Literally speaking, the first guy that they hired to write The Force Awakens needed a year and a half to come up with a good script. They fired him and hired J.J. Abrams and some other hack to churn out a script for the movie in 6 weeks. Yeah, that was a mistake that I made in my Force Awakens video. They did it all in 6 weeks, folks. Not 6 months, 6 weeks. So, of course, I mean, you could do something relatively quickly when all you need is a Xerox machine. Okay, so the simple fact is, you look across the history of the Star Wars movies, with only one exception, every single Star Wars movie that has ever been released has needed 3 years worth of production time. 3 years of production. Basically, that pretty much means, like, I'd say, basically a year of pre-production, a year of production, and a year of post-production. Pre-production is when the writing and the preliminary work with the storyboarding, the casting decisions, the art directions, everything basically like bringing together all the special effects technicians, beginning work on the special effects, that's when stuff gets down. Production is the year when everything gets made and put on camera. You have all the actors come together in costume, having memorized the scripts. You have all the special effects planned, the practical special effects like the puppets, the costumes, and the choreography. And then basically you get everything filmed and put on camera. Post-production is where you take the footage that you have, you cut it up, you edit it together, you find out what works and what doesn't work, you add music, you add sound effects, and you add the CGI. That's basically what post-production is. So you see that with 3 years, you kind of have time to basically have leg room to stretch this stuff out in order to make it as good as possible. But then, with Disney, you realize that Disney is so impatient, they are so greedy and money-grubbing, that they basically have churned out these movies 1 year after another. And the only time when they didn't do that is when they realized that they seriously fucked up. And they basically decided that, you know what, releasing a movie like this around Christmas time isn't going to get us as much money as we'd hoped. Let's put it at the beginning of summer. That way we can pretend that we believe this movie is going to be a summer blockbuster. But nope. That's one of the other things that I've always hated about the Disney movies. Star Wars has always been released at the beginning of the summer because we knew that these movies were going to be summer blockbusters. The idea that Disney is releasing these movies around Christmas time just goes to show that they shamelessly want to play on nostalgia. They want to associate Star Wars with Christmas in order to basically, like, get more money. And it's like, you honestly could have made more money in the summer than you would in Christmas because, well, I'm not going to go out of my way to defend it. The fact is that between this movie and The Farce Awakens, they only had 2 years. That basically means that they didn't have nearly as much time to put a script together, to actually film the damn movie, and even worse, to actually edit the movie into what is actually going to be a good film. Now, I gotta admit that the biggest problem that I had with Farce Awakens, beside being derivative, is the fact that once I realized how derivative the movie was going to be, the movie just became boring. It was a chore to sit through, a chore to watch, because I was literally just waiting for plot points to undo themselves, and it's like, okay, so I didn't really have all that much interest in pursuing the movies that came after this because it's just like I wasn't really all that interested. I didn't really think that it was necessary to actually follow up on this story because what would even be the point at this point? I do admit that basically, like, Rogue One did buy a lot of good faith from me because even though the movie is flawed as hell, I still managed to enjoy it because there was something to actually enjoy with that movie. It showed us something familiar while also showing us something new. And so, But during the time leading up to The Last Jedi, I had heard rumors with the writer and director swearing up and down this movie would not just be a retread of The Empire Strikes Back. Ha 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 ha. Keep that in mind, folks. It's literally going to come back to bite the writer and director, who is not qualified to be called either of those things, in the ass. Basically speaking, so that response did not basically draw any sort of confidence from me because I knew that they were lying. I could sense that they were lying. The only reason that they actually managed to have anything that was even remotely close to quality when it came to fucking Rogue One is the fact that they basically didn't do anything to affect the greater plot of the Star Wars franchise. They had a spin-off movie that didn't deal with any of the main characters, that basically, like, told a story that they felt was interesting enough to tell. I think that basically the point that confirmed a lot of this for me is the fact that I didn't necessarily hate The Force Awakens after I saw it as much as I do now, because in a lot of ways is that after 2016, the the toxic political narrative that started spewing out of Hollywood thanks to Ghostbusters effectively became full force at that point. I think that basically I should make like my own video talking about this phenomenon, but as soon as I basically saw that an entire reboot of the Ghostbusters franchise was being made specifically to make a movie about fucking in order to basically make the Ghostbusters into an all-female cast, that literally 100% knew what that movie was going to be, and I literally said to myself, they're using this as a smokescreen. They basically don't have confidence that this movie is actually going to be good, so when this movie actually bombs, they're going to use sexism and misogyny as a shield, in order to basically claim that, oh, people who don't like this movie are just sexist and misogynist. They have a problem with women being heroes in the movies, despite the fact that there are several hundred movies in which the main female characters are action heroes, like, for example, Underworld, Resident Evil, even movies where a man is a main character, they usually always feature a badass female that basically takes just as much screen time as him. Basically speaking, this whole narrative of basically women can't be action heroes is nonsense. What people have a problem with is their favorite franchises being brought back in order to make political statements like this. You want to basically make a Ghostbusters movie, make the Ghostbusters movie people wanted this entire time, but quit trying to basically force a political narrative onto all of us, when all we want to do is watch a funny movie about three elderly comedians fighting ghosts in New York City, because that's what the appeal of the Ghostbusters franchise was. It wasn't the ghosts, it was the personalities of the four leads playing off each other. Harold Ramis, rest your soul. So, because of the political narrative that spawned up in 2016, I actually found that a lot of people that I had basically kind of identified with on a political level, people that I enjoyed hanging out with and respected, they changed. They had basically become the worst type of people. They basically had become the kind of people that were willing to sell their own that basically were willing to flog themselves in the street in order to appear virtuous, in order to appease the mob. And it's like, you don't ever try to appease the mob. So basically this whole narrative came out, and finally people started talking about what Hollywood was doing, the conditioning that Hollywood was doing into trying to not only make women look better than how they actually are, but to literally try and make men hate themselves. And I gotta admit that I fell for it because I didn't see Rey for the Mary Sue that she was immediately. The biggest problem that I had with Rey is the fact that she used the Force just immediately on that Stormtrooper guy, but by that point, I had literally checked out of the movie because I didn't care anymore. Starkiller Base literally made me not care about the movie to the point where I was just counting down until they both destroyed the thing and when Han Solo got killed. So I didn't necessarily care all that much. But afterwards, I did care. I cared a whole lot because I realized that the people making these arguments about Rey, they were right. She literally had nothing to her character, and she literally just was a thing that was put into the movie in order to make little girls feel powerful, in order to feel good about themselves. And the worst part about it is that the attitude that followed after, with so many women at Lucasfilm saying that girls can't identify with Luke Skywalker, so they need their own female protagonist. And I'm just left thinking, if girls can't identify with Luke Skywalker, doesn't that make them the sexists? Because I watched the movie Underworld, and I can identify with the character of that movie, because basically she was turned into a vampire under false pretenses. The person that she admired most had been lying to her after he murdered her family. That's a story that I can get behind. So why is it that I am not only can I identify with a female protagonist, but I'm actually expected to identify with a female protagonist? But asking a girl or any kind of woman to identify with a male protagonist, that's unheard of. That's sexist. No, a woman shouldn't be expected to identify with a male protagonist at all, because a woman deserves to have a protagonist with the same genitalia as she does. You see, that's how ridiculous this entire argument is. It's completely unnecessary. And they just want to make it into a problem because they want to sow the seeds of, not only sow the seeds of controversy, but sow the seeds of discourse. They basically want there to be civil unrest. And I just left thinking, once the Ghostbusters movie happened, I literally thought we had gotten past all of this. That women could finally stop complaining because they literally had all the same rights that men do. But nope, women still find things to complain about, even though the wage gap is a complete myth that has been debunked several fucking times. They still espouse the narrative. And worst of all, they want to claim that the United States is literally a rape culture. You want to know where rape culture exists in these countries? In prisons. Male prisons. So, the only victims of rape culture in this country are male prisoners. And I don't see anybody like holding up signs and protesting outside prisons for the plight of those men. So, you want to go to a place that actually does have a rape culture? You know exactly where to go. And unfortunately, they're not going to go to these places because they actually know that the United States isn't as bad as they claim it to be. They want to make everybody think that it is as bad as they claim to be because that's how they're going to attain power. But they also realize that the United States is the only place where they have the power to complain about it. So literally speaking, this country that's supposedly so bad for women and minorities is apparently the only country where women and minorities have a voice to talk about this sort of thing. You see, that's basically the real issue here, is the fact that basically these people don't even realize the power of the rights that they actually have, and they don't respect them, because they've never grown up in an era where they didn't have these rights. They've never respected the rights that they have basically had, and so they take them for granted. They treat these rights as if they are either nothing or they are inadequate. And worse, they try to take the rights away from people that disagree with them because they feel like they shouldn't be disagreed with. That's a big problem because effectively they can't form a convincing argument without resorting to fucking ad hominems or basically going on personal attacks of their political opponents or trying to silence their political opponents. That's why they have to resort to doing these things, because they literally have no argument. All of their arguments depend on creating a bullshit narrative that's meant to make the people that they're trying to convince angry. And that's not a logical argument, that's an emotional one. But anyway, I think that I've talked so much about the politics around this movie, and I'm certainly not done talking about it. I just wanted to frame the narrative of what 2016 did to my opinions on these movies. So, because I now knew what the narrative was, I was actively searching for it, and I basically didn't want really anything to do with movies that push this kind of narrative, because I knew that it was real, and I was frustrated with it. I didn't want anything to do with it. So I'd say, what was it? Was it 2018 or 2017? I'm pretty sure it's 2017. No, it had to have been 2006. No, I don't know. I don't recall when the trailer dropped. All I know is that it happened before the movie came out, and I gotta admit, I was not moved by the trailer at all. In fact, I was actually kind of disappointed by the people that basically were so won over by the trailer, thinking that the movie was going to be the greatest Star Wars movie ever. Sorry to take that dig at you, Jeremy, but I just literally could not believe that there were so few people that actually saw The Force Awakens for what it was, and now basically, still wanted to shill out for The Force Awakens, despite the fact that the clear agenda behind it had been pushed. And those of you who are saying that, maybe you're wrong about the agenda, J.J. Abrams literally, changed the platform he literally changed the hirement process for his studio, Bad Robot, and claimed that they now had a diversity requirement to hire for. Don't you just love that? The idea that basically the only reason that you got a job is because you are the right skin color. I mean, they basically want to make white people ashamed of that, despite the fact that that never actually happens, and yet they basically claim that, it's the only way they can have any kind of fair advantage over white people. And it's just, they're hypocrites, 100% hypocritical, and every single time they open their mouths, they show how hypocritical they are. Because it's not about actually attaining justice, it's about turning the tables on the people that they believe are oppressing them, despite the fact that there's no actual evidence of oppression going on. So anyways, I just basically, thought that it was just so pathetic that basically they wanted to boil down people hiring them, instead of hiring them based on any kind of merit or acting talent, that they hired them based on a checkbox. So, when the trailer came out, it was boring and trite. You basically, saw Rey on an island with Luke, where it looks like she's training, and basically, talking about, and then basically with shots of Kylo Ren, and truth be told, I don't really remember all that much of the trailer. That's how forgettable it was. I do remember the walkers, the AT-AT walkers that are big and bigger, blacker, and uncut. So basically, yeah, that didn't really necessarily bode confidence for me that this movie was going to be anything but an Empire, the Empire Strikes Back yet again. So, and basically, the way the trailer ended made me curious, because it ends with Luke saying the infamous line, "It's time for the Jedi to end." And that line actually intrigued me, because I knew that it was potentially going to be something bad, but I still wanted to interpret it as maybe, just maybe, these people might know what they are doing. A lot of people were speculating on what this possibly could mean. Is Luke talking about? Is Luke gonna fall to the dark side in this movie? What does he mean by "it's time for the Jedi to end"? I had my own theories because, like I said, Luke's Jedi Order was to correct the mistakes of the previous Jedi Order. His order was a gray Jedi Order, so effectively speaking, maybe what he was saying in that it's time for the Jedi to end is the idea that the old ways of the Jedi are supposed to end, as in, basically speaking, the Jedi have to be renewed. What the people thought of what the Jedi originally were has to come to an end so that a new Jedi Order can thrive. The Grey Order, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I thought that Luke was going to be, and I admit that I was wrong, because, I mean, part of the prophecy is to basically that the Force has to be refined through gray sight. That's what bringing balance to the Force actually means. Anakin was supposed to balance the light and the dark side, which is why he had to walk the paths of both. And because Anakin is now dead, Luke has to follow that legacy of balance by showcasing that the Force isn't as black and white as the Jedi and the Sith believed it to be. The Jedi and the Sith inadvertently created themselves by claiming this dogmatic view of the Force, the light side and the dark side. You don't have to basically deny that good and evil exist. You basically have to embrace the fact that both, that light and dark are a part of nature. So I was hoping to see the gray Grand Master Luke Skywalker in this movie, but I still wasn't convinced. I wasn't going to see this movie. And it wasn't basically based on the same thing with Rogue One. It wasn't going to be, oh, I have a gift card, I was going to go see it. Nope. I was literally content with not going to see this movie in theaters and just letting it come out on, like, DVD and Redbox until I would actually go to see it. Now, here's how the story goes. It was Christmas of 2017. Basically, my sister and her husband, they went out of town to go visit their in-laws, and they asked me to watch over their house during Christmas time. And I had nothing better to do, so I decided to basically go up there and, decide to watch the house, hang out with their pets and whatnot, and just basically have Christmas with myself. I'm okay with that. I'm perfectly okay with that. Unfortunately, my car was in the shop at the time, so I had to get a ride from my other sister and her fiance at the time. Yeah, they hadn't gotten married yet, so... Or did they? Yeah, they hadn't gotten married yet, so... Basically, her fiance, his name is Drew. As they were driving me up to down to my other sister's place, we were just a few minutes out there, so he's like, so, have you seen episode 8, The Last Jedi yet? And he's like, no, and I honestly don't think I'm going to, at least not in theaters. He's like, oh, that's a shame. I wanted to get your opinion on it, because we haven't seen it yet either, and people are either saying that it's the best Star Wars movie of all time, or it's the worst Star Wars movie of all time and should be removed from canon. And I literally told him, based on The Force Awakens, it's probably going to be the latter. So that was my first indication of how this movie was going, because I had heard people saying that it was a great movie, that it was basically like the best Star Wars movie to date, and I literally refused to believe that. I was curious, but I wasn't curious enough to go see it yet. But then when my brother-in-law told me about that, the idea that it's literally like, it's so polarizing that people are either saying that it's the best or that it needs to be struck from canon, it basically was garnering my curiosity enough to where, basically speaking, I spent the next few days watching my sister's house, feeding the cats and whatnot. Christmas Day came and went, and I got a Christmas card from my uncle in the mail, and in that Christmas card was a Fandango gift card. And basically speaking, December 26th, 2007. That was the last day that I needed to watch the house for my sister. She and her husband were going to come back sometime that afternoon, and it was a Tuesday. And anybody who knows anything about me knows that Tuesday is a movie seeing day for me because the theater by my house, basically like the theater that I live close to, not by my house, but the theater that's near me, they basically like have a discount Tuesdays where you can see basically any movie for basically a great price. So it's like basically a movie that comes out that's like worth, I don't know, like $17 or whatnot at regular price, you can see it for basically $6. So I decided that if I was gonna leave the house today, I might as well go drop off my stuff back in my apartment, and then basically go down to the movie theater and just see a movie. And so then I basically decided that, okay, so the only thing that's actually looks like it might be worth seeing right now is The Last Jedi. And I just got a gift card in the mail, so I technically wouldn't have to pay for it. So I decided that if I was going to do something, I'm going to go do it. So I basically decided that I was going to go see the movie then. I drove back down. I drove back down to my place because now I had my car back, and basically it's like I basically was, I stopped off at my bank first of all. I stopped off at the bank, and I stopped off at the bank to drop off some checks, and I started texting my sister. She was asking like what I was gonna do today, and I basically said I'm probably gonna go to the movies, probably gonna go see the Star Wars movie. And she's like, "Hey, we were planning to do the exact same thing. How about you come see it with us?" And it's like, "Well, what time do you want to do it?" I was planning to go to an early show. They couldn't exactly go see it until like sometime later in the afternoon, to where it would be after dark, to where we would leave. But I basically figured that since Fandango was fronting the bill, I might as well like go join them, see the movie in like the big theaters with like the comfy seats and whatnot. Might as well make an experience out of it, especially since I wasn't paying for it. So went online, basically ordered the ticket, had to upcharge for fucking Fandango. Fandango is a fucking scam. Never ever use it. What was interesting is the fact that they were doing a special promotion to where if you actually went to see The Last Jedi, you could actually like use a promo code to get a free Last Jedi poster mailed to your house. Free. All you have to do is pay $7 in shipping, and I'm just like, that's not free. So I basically decided that if I liked the movie, I'd probably get the poster, because why not? If I didn't like the movie, nah. So we went to see the movie. We sat in the big comfy seats. It's almost been 40 minutes, and we're finally going to start talking about the movie, and literally speaking, just, I'd say about 20 minutes into this movie, it already lost me. That is just how far this movie, that's how hard this movie tried to literally lose its audience. And the best part about it was my sister and her fiance, Drew, they basically agreed with me that, yeah, this isn't good. This is not Star Wars. So who knows if this movie gets too long? If this video gets too long, I might cut it into 2 parts. But okay, so now that I've taken a breath, we can finally start talking about the inadequacies of the movie. So, where to begin? I think that basically what showcases how badly this movie screwed up in compared to its predecessors is the fact that Really, when you think about it, every single Star Wars movie has had a gap in time, a time jump from the previous entry. For example, the first Star Wars movie, to going to Empire Strikes Back, that had a total of 3 years in which Luke had been training to harness his powers to use the Force with some help of Obi-Wan's Force Ghost before being sent to train with Yoda in order to complete his training. So that's 3 years. 3 years in which you could understand that Luke would gradually grow more powerful, but he's not all-powerful at all. After that, you basically have, between Empire Strikes Back to Return of the Jedi, 1 year time gap, because it took them a while to confirm that Han was being kept by Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine. So, and probably took them a long time to plan out their routes in order to basically to get a plan in order to get in there. But I could basically talk about Return of the Jedi at some other time. The point is that a year has passed. Luke has learned from his mistakes at fighting Vader when he wasn't prepared for it. He has paid the price. He has basically passed the trial of flesh, which is basically like one of the 5 Jedi trials, by losing his hand. So, basically speaking, Luke basically knows a whole lot better. He has matured. He is no longer the impulsive, angry young man that he was in Return of the Jedi. He's still susceptible to anger. And I gotta admit, that's one of the things that my father just upsets me so much about. But we'll talk about that in frickin' Rise of Skywalker, shall we? Actually, we might have to talk about that in this movie. Okay, so you get the sense that there's a maturation process. The prequel trilogy. Phantom Menace to Attack of the Clones. Fucking 10 years pass. You kind of would have to, considering that Anakin was 9 years old in the first movie, and you can't really have a, 12-year-old going around like fighting in a war, can you? So, Anakin is now 19 years old, and he's basically like, he's still a Jedi Padawan, and he's in love with Padme. That's basically like progressing the story. Attack of the Clones 2, Revenge of the Sith, 3 years. So yeah, Anakin is basically 22 years old when he does all this bad stuff that he does to the galaxy. I mean, it makes sense because Luke is basically roughly the same age too, so 22 years old, and it's kind of hard to fathom that the Clone Wars last only about 3 years, but then again, when you think about it, the Galactic Civil War only lasted roughly, I'd say, given the benefit of the doubt, maybe 5 years total. Okay, so how does this movie start out? Well, this movie literally picks up immediately where the Force Awakens left off. And that is just a terrible decision. And the reason for why they wanted to do that, they didn't want to have the time skip, because instead of giving us a flashback like any reasonable director should, instead they basically just they basically did all that just because they wanted to do a joke. They wanted to basically do a fucking joke. I need to basically clarify my thoughts here. One of the worst parts about it is that I think that pretty much the only thing that people were actually curious about when it came to this movie is, well, 5 things. 1, where did the First Order come from? How did they rise up from the ashes of the Empire? Are they basically just a new sect of the Empire? Was the Empire ever truly defeated? The supplementary material has something to say about that, and it's terrible. Number 2, who is Snoke? Like, what is Snoke? Where did he come from? How has he been this ancient thing? Where has he been during all this time? How does he relate to the events? How is everything going to be tied together? We need to get some more information on him. 3, who are Rey's parents? Because what is Rey's familial lineage, because that's the only thing that can explain why Rey is so goddamn powerful. I said that there were 5 things. Oh, yeah. Number 4. Is Finn going to be alright? He got slashed by a lightsaber across his spine. Is he still alive? Is he going to be crippled? Is he going to have some kind of resentment for trying to be a hero and save Rey when it was the only heroic thing that he had done in the entire movie and it nearly got him killed? And then, number 5, and most importantly, why was Luke on the island? What was he doing all the way out here, and why did he leave a map so that somebody could find him? Those were the 5 questions that everybody wanted to answer from J.J. Abrams' movie, and that was basically the huge thing that this movie was, that had a lot of stakes on the line. That basically, you basically had to explain these 5 things in order to satisfy the audience, and you had to do them in an actually satisfying way. Now, okay, so one of the most alarming things that we heard from the news is the fact that, from following the production of the movie, is the fact that the rumors that J.J. Abrams had a planned outline and treatment and suggestions about what the sequel to his movie should do, giving over to the new director and writer of this movie, Ruin Johnsonless. Yep. I know that his real name is Rian Johnson, but as far as I'm concerned, Ruin Johnsonless is the guy. It is actually a much more fitting name for a man of his caliber, or lack thereof. We basically heard from the production that he took J.J. Abrams' treatment or suggestions or outline of what the sequel should be, what the story beat should, and he literally threw it in the trash. You see, that's a running theme of this sequel trilogy. You get ideas from the predecessors of the people who came before you, who had ideas of what these movies should be, just throw them in the garbage. Yeah, because it's not like taking advice from the people who had worked on this project before you, who had set up all these story beats, might be a good idea. Nope. You're confident enough to actually do this yourself. Just basically disrespect your predecessors by throwing their hard work into the garbage. You're not going to need it anyway, because you're so good at what you do. Just keep enjoying the smell of your own asshole. I really hope you enjoy the view up there. So, Rian Johnson threw out the suggestion, the outline for where the trilogy should go, and he wrote his own story. And I gotta admit that it's basically been proven at this point over all the various videos that have been made about Rian Johnson showcasing his attitude when it comes to not only filmmaking, but Star Wars not just Star Wars, but filmmaking in general. Johnson basically hated the original Star Wars trilogy. He hates Star Wars as a franchise, and literally wanted to basically change it up to the point where everything about Star Wars would be different. As in, he wanted to destroy what had come before in Star Wars in order to replace it with what he thought his vision of what Star Wars should be. You see, you can basically boil down to the problems of the Disney trilogy with the attitudes of its 2 directors. Without Lucas there supervising everything, you realize that the people who are in charge of making Star Wars have only ever viewed it completely superficially and stereotypically. Disney only bought this franchise in order to make money, and they hired J.J. Abrams to do it. Now, what is J.J. Abrams' stereotypical depiction of Star Wars? J.J. Abrams believes that Star Wars is nothing more than a repetitive nothing more than a repetitive toy commercial that keeps telling the same story beats over and over and over again and only exists to sell merchandise. Because if something has a popular toy line in which the franchise makes a lot of money, then it must have absolutely no integrity, right? It must have the same amount of integrity as those G.I. Joe cartoons or the Transformers series, right? Yeah, God forbid people actually respect this franchise that actually has garnered a whole lot of support and almost a religious like following of this franchise, right? And worst of all, J.J. Abrams literally insulted the people who support this franchise, the people who buy the toys, who buy the costumes, who dress up in costumes, and wait outside the theaters, right? With Kylo Ren. Ruin Johnson's stereotypical depiction of Star Wars is that Star Wars has never been as smart as people think that it is. That it's literally just, that every single thing that it's ever made is just superficial and it doesn't have any sort of depth to it at all. But he's wrong, of course. He thinks that he's the only person that actually ever added any sort of depth to Star Wars, that he's the only person that actually promoted the actual themes of the Star Wars franchise, when in reality he isn't, because he doesn't even understand what those themes are. And worst of all, the people that support him, the people that support The Last Jedi, they're the ones that are claiming that the fandom is somehow toxic, and yet The Rise of Skywalker has revealed that they are the ones who are actually the toxic ones, because God forbid a movie actually adhere to telling a complete narrative instead of shutting down the narrative in the middle of the trilogy. They are so offended at the fact that the studio decided to ignore Rian Johnson's movie with the fucking Rise of Skywalker that now they are literally threatening J.J. Abrams. They are literally giving out threats to J.J. Abrams, planning to create some kind of conspiracy in order to basically link him with some kind of political controversy. Something to do with Epstein, I don't know. So who's really the toxic ones? The people that are basically like disappointed that their favorite film franchise got ruined by someone who doesn't understand anything about filmmaking, who is too stupid to realize that he's not actually a good filmmaker at all? Or the people who are so toxic that they demand that an actor divorce his wife in real life just so that he can get together with his co-star from a movie just because they ship their characters together. You see, that's the biggest problem with Disney Star Wars, because when I said that Star Wars had universal appeal, it had the appeal because it basically had themes that everybody could get behind. Disney Star Wars, however, is only going with themes and trends that only certain few people can get behind. Star Wars was never about the romance. Effectively speaking, George Lucas used romantic ideas in Star Wars as a means to an end. He decided to have Han Solo and Princess Leia get together just as a means of preventing Luke from actually having a romantic relationship, because he knows that's not the Jedi way. Of course, Luke's entire purpose is to change up the Jedi way, but Luke had to ultimately remain celibate, because Luke's story wasn't about getting the girl, it was about redeeming his father and restoring the Jedi way and bringing peace to the galaxy. In the prequel trilogy, the romance between Anakin and Padme, a lot of people say that it's like the cringiest thing ever, but it was only ever just a means to an end in order to explain where Leia and Luke came from. And I gotta admit, I enjoy their romance. Hell, in a lot of ways, like the Clone Wars, the serials with Tartakovsky, and the CG Clone Wars series, they actually make the romance better in a lot of ways. Now I can genuinely believe that they are genuinely in love. Of course, I never had a problem with that. I never had a problem with their cringy dialogue and the whole sand thing, because, like, I just don't get that, why so many people hate it. He grew up on a desert planet surrounded by sand, where sandstorms could basically kill you at any given moment, where he was basically forced to clean up the interior of a junker shop, where he had to basically make his way as a junker, repairing everything, where you had to clean sand out of everything. I'm not surprised why he doesn't like sand. Like, literally speaking, I don't like sand. I go to the beach, I sit down on the beach for 5 minutes, and I've got sand literally everywhere. So, but I'm not here to talk about Attack of the Clones. I gotta keep these things more succinct. So, the worst part about it is that when you try to make romance a main theme of your Star Wars movies, you basically get the shippers. And basically speaking, like, no offense to anybody out there who ships, but when you basically invite these kind of people into your movies, the crazies start to come out of the woodwork. And that's the worst part about Disney Star Wars, is the fact that they literally designed their entire trilogy to appeal to the crazies. Because God forbid you try to appeal to the built-in fan base of billions of people who already support this franchise just the way it is. Even the people who didn't like the prequels will support this franchise just the way it is. You instead want to basically make this entire saga into nothing more than a political platform, so that you can bitch and moan about how, quote, unfair your life is for your preferred gender, even though you're lying. So, and so you basically invite literally the cringiest, the worst type of people. The people that basically claim the moral high ground on anything because they are going to be, quote, on the right side of history. There's no such thing as the right side of history. History is an objective recording of what happened. It's literally speaking, there's no right side to it at all. What determines what is right and what is wrong is entirely up to the beholder. Sure, we have objective criteria, but these friggin' reeing creatures have gone out of their way to destroy any kind of objective criteria that we once had for judging what is morally right and what is morally wrong. So why even bother at this point? So they basically claim that because they're on the right side of history, that they have the moral high ground. But they're only doing it to signal how virtuous they are, when in reality they don't actually espouse to any of these virtues at all, because their views of the world, of race and gender, they're actually more stereotypical and more offensive than people who just don't want them to be as big and important. Because we don't judge people based on whether or not they're women or they're minorities. We judge people based on what they can actually do, their own fucking abilities. I mean, basically take the friggin' Clone Wars serials, for example, and friggin' the Clone Wars TV series. A lot of people would basically make the argument that Count Dooku should have hired Asajj Ventress to be his apprentice purely on the fact that she's a woman. Because it's like, oh, he should have a woman apprentice because all the apprentices that the Sith have had in the past have only ever just been male. But right now I'm literally watching the scene in which Asajj Ventress has to test herself and her abilities in the Force against literally 24 different opponents, all physically larger and stronger than she is, but through the Force she is able to be fast enough to outmaneuver them, use the Force to deflect their abilities, and thanks to her lightsaber, she just cut down literally a 20-foot monster man beast. That is her merit. That is why he should consider her for being an apprentice. Not because she's a woman, but because she can actually get the job done. And worse and best of all, Dooku isn't blinded by the fact that she has merit. She basically, is impressive, but she's not quite there yet. She's not impressive enough. She still has a lot to learn. So yeah, just because she has merit doesn't mean that she's basically 100% qualified for the job he has in mind. Although, considering the job that he has in mind is basically to just be, a test for Anakin Skywalker, the point is the fact that you basically want to have everything handed to you on a silver platter, then that means that you don't earn it. And that's the kind of people that Disney and Kathleen Kennedy wanted to appeal to. The kind of people who think that Star Wars has only ever just been an all-boys club, and they deserve to have their day in the sun. When literally they don't, because it's never been an all-boys club. They just have refused to appreciate the female protagonists and antagonists that the series has had thus far. Because if they're not the most important person in the movie, then they might as well not even exist, am I right? Fuck those people. So, I need to start talking about the movie. Because I wanted to start talking about the movie, but there's just so much to fucking talk about in order to get the correct mindset in talking about the movie, and it just makes me more and more angrier the more I think about it. At one point, I was talking about how the time skip, the lack of a time skip is a huge problem in this movie because it literally showcases that nothing has changed from the previous movie. It literally picks up right where the previous movie left off, meaning that as powerful as Rey is going to be in this movie, she once again hasn't earned anything. And as powerful and as dangerous as the First Order is in this movie, they haven't changed and thus haven't earned anything either. So, what is even the fucking point? What is the fucking goddamn point? Okay, so let's start off with the opening credits scroll. As I've said, the opening credits scroll in previous movies is to help inform the condition of the universe in order to build how the universe is functioning at this point. The spectacle is meant to inform that. The opening credits scroll is to lay the groundwork. So how has the galaxy changed in the, I'd say, 2 hours since Rey left the Resistance in order to go find Luke? The First Order reigns. Okay, so the First Order wiped out the New Republic. I can admit that. You kind of can't have a centralized government when the capital of the government and apparently all of its resources were wiped out by a huge planet-destroying superweapon. However, the idea of the First Order reigning is just impossible because the First Order just committed a galaxy-wide atrocity by blowing up 5 planets all at once, wiping out, just basically committing genocide of 5 times the scale of the Death Star. You would think that the rest of the galaxy would be completely outraged by this, that they would literally resist First Order rule. And, most of all, at the fact that their planet-destroying superweapon that did this, which housed most of their military force and their ships, has just been destroyed as well. So, the First Order should literally be suffering from just as much a crippling loss as the Republic. And literally speaking, news of Starkiller Base being destroyed should rally all the people of the Republic, of the galaxy, in outrage against the First Order and realize that in this vulnerable state, they can be beaten. It's war. We should literally be in all-out war at this point, but nope. The First Order rules the galaxy because apparently everybody in the galaxy is just too complacent to actually stand up and fight against these people. Look, I know the old saying that the only thing evil needs to succeed is for good men to do nothing, but come on, that's philosophy. We're trying to make an actual movie here with a narrative that is supposed to be entertaining, and I'll get to why that is. And I'll get to that facet at the end of the fucking franchise, at the end of the friggin' review, rant, whatever it is. Okay, so. Mm, mm, uh. Okay, so I'm pretty sure that the rest of what happened in the credit scroll is completely unnecessary because it's literally the shortest credit scroll of any Star Wars movie. I mean, and it's just this is your chance to lay some serious groundwork for what the movie for what the audience needs to know. It's your chance to literally tell and not show and get away with it. And you're choosing to basically end it so quickly, but that's the problem. That's the simple fact is nothing has changed from the last movie because somebody thought that it would be a good idea to set the movie immediately after the last one. So it's you stupid idiot. So nothing has changed. So the movie literally starts out with an action scene over the Resistance base planet, and they're trying to evacuate because the First Order is coming in with their fleet in order to wipe them out. And the First Order is apparently suffering from no losses from the destruction of Starkiller Base whatsoever. I don't even get the First Order. How the hell are they so heavily funded? Telling us that they rose from the ashes of the Empire is not an explanation. You need to actually explain where these idiots came from. I... So, the rebels are trying to escape. The First Order has a Dreadnought Star Destroyer that is equipped with huge friggin' cannons that can basically wipe out an entire fleet. They're a fleet buster, I think that's what the technical term is. We see Admiral, we see General Bill Weasley, Hux. He comes in, he's planning to wipe out the First Order, and then basically we see Poe Dameron with BB-8 flying in his X-Wing fighter, and basically is coming in to try and stall them with a distraction, and it says that he has an urgent message from General Leia for General Hugs. Yeah. And then, of course, this is one of the things that I mentioned in the Force Awakens, that the fact that, literally speaking, the humor in this movie literally killed it. Basically speaking, there are whole videos made about how humor was completely unneeded in this movie, despite the fact that it's supposed to be the darkest Star Wars movie ever made, but humor literally killed it. The simple fact is that, the friggin'... Okay, so... Like I said, Poe Dameron's writing for his dialogue, it has too much of a millennial 2015 kind of humorous vibe to it, and this movie once again shows that the dialogue in this movie does not fit in the Star Wars galaxy at all. It doesn't fit in the galaxy far, far away because a long time ago either, because it sounds like modern day dialogue. If you guys who watched the movie remember what I'm talking about, I'm of course talking about, literally speaking, Poe Dameron does the Verizon Wireless "Can you hear me now" shtick. And it's just like, seriously? We're doing this in a Star Wars movie? This was the first indication that I knew something was wrong. And when it's all over and they basically realize that Poe has basically just been playing them the entire time, Poe literally ends it with a "yo mama" joke. Yeah, I have a message from General Huggs' mother. And then basically Poe like used that entire time to charge up his engines, and now he's boosting all across the ship. He's taking out like their heavy guns and whatnot, and I gotta admit it's a cool action scene, cool maneuvers. And basically speaking, like, Leia is planning to like send out the fleet and whatnot so that they can escape while they're distracted with one fucking fighter. Leia's literally telling Poe to break off the attack and return, but Poe's basically like, no, like, we have to take this ship out or else it's going to pursue us and it's going to destroy the fleet. And then we bring in the bombers. Okay, so remember how I said that there's a time and place for everything? Yeah. Gareth Edwards did a smart idea by showing us in Rogue One the horrors of what war can actually be. Like, basically giving us a Star Wars movie that was actually more of a war movie than a fantasy movie, because in that movie, you didn't fucking have the Jedi coming to the rescue. You just had guerrilla fighters. You just had people that were fighting in the war. And basically, like, you had the underdog story. Rian Johnson basically said that he wanted to base this action scene off of World War II, and you might think that that's acceptable considering that, like, Gareth Edwards based a few scenes in Rogue One off of, like, Vietnam, so it makes sense, somewhat. The problem is, you can't just adapt the same kind of tactics and fighting style from an actual IRL war just because you want to make a political statement about that war or show off how savvy you are in war history. Instead, you have to actually adapt the themes that you want to use in the movie in order to actually fit with the technology that you have at play here, because this universe in a galaxy far, far away has technology that is far beyond our own technology. It's far beyond technology that we basically had in World War II, where, effectively speaking, the best that we could do is fly a plane over an enemy base or territory and physically drop bombs on them. But in this galaxy, you instead have technology to where you can literally shoot bombs made out of energy from sleek, small, fast-moving ships with great maneuverability. And what does Rian Johnson choose to do? He instead chooses to have the bombers that are responsible for taking out this one Star Destroyer be these large, cumbersome, completely non-aerodynamic, slow-moving vehicles, slowest moving vehicles that you have ever seen. And they are literally just loaded to the brim with explosives, meaning that these things are literally powder kegs. Effectively speaking, there is no fucking way that any intelligent man designed these ships under the belief system that they would be feasible in a galaxy far, far away. Johnson literally designed these things to show off how terrible this design choice was, because he wanted to create tension. He wanted to create tension by putting our heroes in a dire situation in which they couldn't succeed. The problem is the audience shouldn't accept this because we already know the galaxy has better bombing technology than this. Hell, you literally showcase the First Order having better bombers than this. The simple fact is that these ships, these bombers, would never work in the Star Wars galaxy. Because in order to have a ship in the Star Wars galaxy, unless it's a very large battleship that has adequate armor and shielding to deflect deflect fire and bombardment, you'll literally have to have small, sleek, designed ships that are capable of maneuvering about. Even blockade runners have more maneuverability than these things. So, 30 years ago, the technology that the rebels had at their disposal, that they had to find in junkyards and slapdash together, the Y-Wings, the Y-Wing fighters, those are the bombers that should have been used in this scene. And the rebels clearly have them. We actually saw a few of them in the attack on Starkiller Base, and we even see some of them in Rise of Skywalker. And we definitely know that, like, because they have fucking X-Wing fighters, even vintage model X-Wing fighters from the previous generation, they should have a few Y-Wings left lying around, but they don't. They don't use them in this scene. The Y-Wings could have immediately flown towards this ship, dropped their proton torpedoes onto the fucking dreadnought, blown up its cannons, blown up the entire ship, blown it up so easily, had a single loss, no single casualty. Instead, you have these slow-moving things that need to be protected in a seriously confusing clusterfuck of dogfighting in which one of them gets blown up by accident when a TIE fighter crashes into it. And from that moment on, the TIE fighters crashing into these things cause a chain reaction in which all but one of these fucking cumbersome, clunky bombers filled to the brim with explosives get blown up. And so, there's only one bomber left. It's trying its best to fly over the dreadnought, somehow not getting destroyed. And we see a girl on the inside. She basically is like, she can't get to the controls. She fell 30 feet, probably breaking her back. The controller, it was left up there on the top. She has to kick it in order to make it fall. And so she grabs it in order to drop the bombs. Do I need to remind people that we're in space? I can believe that a ship has some kind of artificial gravity system, because, that's... Like ships like the Millennium Falcon, you see the characters walking around and instead of floating. I can believe that the ships have technology to create their own kind of gravity field on the inside of a ship so that people can walk around and feel comfortable inside of them. But outside, not so much. How the heck do these bombs dropping out of the ship somehow actually drop towards the dreadnought? As soon as they escape the bomber's internal gravity field, they should be floating out in space. They should be floating back upwards towards the bomber ship itself, and then boom, completely failed. If they want to pretend that this movie's theme is all about failure, then that would have been a perfect example of failure right then and there. And don't try and tell me that maybe they're drawn to the dreadnought magnetically. How can they be drawn to the dreadnought magnetically without being drawn back towards the bombing ship? I mean, unless the bombing ship in and of itself is covered in magnets that are designed to repel the magnets in the friggin' bombs themselves. Okay, so that one bomber managed to blow up the dreadnought, but the girl that was piloting it, that had to drop the bombs, was killed. Whoop-de-fluckin'-do. I'm sure she's not going to be important. Hopefully. Please, God. I don't even believe in God. But I'm begging any kind of supreme being out there to somehow deliver me from the evils of this movie. So that was our opening battle sequence, and it's stupid. It's so fucking stupid because it's like we know that the technology in the Star Wars universe is better than this. Hell, the rebels had to basically put their technology together as quickly as possible, and they weren't working with a lot of resources. They had to make do with what they had. The resistance should have been funded by the New Republic this entire time. Hell, there literally shouldn't be a resistance. They should literally be the Grand Army of the Republic. And we're back. I had to take a little brief break there, because now we're going to start talking about the movie. I don't basically want to make this movie and this review into just a synopsis of the movie, but I do want to talk about all the stuff that pisses me off. Leia is one of the things that pisses me off in this movie, because after they succeed in this operation, they destroy the fleet-busting dreadnought that would have destroyed all of their ships. Leia has the nerve to reprimand Poe. Poe, the guy who literally destroyed Starkiller Base just an hour ago. He literally gets demoted because he disobeyed orders, and yet he did the right thing. The simple fact is, in this scenario, Leia was wrong. She was wrong to call off the operation. Poe was right in disobeying her in order to destroy the dreadnought. Because if that thing had followed them, regardless of their shields or not, it would have destroyed all of their ships. What were you planning to do then, Leia? Huh? The worst part about it is, this scene disrespects the character that Princess Leia used to be by making her into a terrible leader, because Leia was not this stupid in the original trilogy. You guys remember the scene from Empire Strikes Back where Han basically checks on the command center to see if Leia and 3PO are all right? Literally speaking, 3PO wants to get to the final transport in order to escape. Leia is literally refusing to escape. She is staying in the control room in order to conduct the battle that is happening not only on the ground against the walkers, but also overseeing the battle in the stars of the fleet of the fighters trying to escape into with the transports into space. Effectively speaking, Leia understands the fact that that in war, you're going to have to expect losses in order to succeed. Effectively speaking, she's refusing to give up on the operation in order to basically ensure victory. She's literally reallocating resources in order to protect the ground fighters instead of the fighters fleeing. So, the idea that Leia would literally give up on an operation just to basically save a few people in some really hazardous, clunky, gonna blow up anyway fighters. When they're gonna die moments afterward anyway, that's just stupid. And we all know why it was written this way. Because of the agenda. Because, basically speaking, Leia has to put the hotshot male pilot in his place. Has to basically emasculate Poe for doing the right thing, for being smarter than her. That's really what it is. It's revenge for being smarter than her. So, she slaps him and demotes him. The guy that destroyed Starkiller Base, basically saved 5 planets in the entire galaxy, literally just got demoted because he refused to follow a stupid order that didn't make any fucking sense. Now we're basically going to talk about how this movie completely ruins any sort of enjoyment the fans could have gotten from wanting to see how the movie would follow up on The Force Awakens. You remember when I said that Finn was one of the biggest curiosities of the first movie, whether or not he was even still alive, would he be okay, would he be crippled? How he was one of the most interesting characters from The Force Awakens, really because everybody else was so boring. Well, after the fleet jumps into hyperspace, we finally catch up with Finn, and he's lying on a medical table inside some kind of suit that's filled with water, and I'm just left thinking, why the hell isn't that man in a Bacta tank? Are you guys seriously telling me that the Resistance that was funded by the New Republic doesn't have enough money to actually afford decent medical equipment in this galaxy? That man should be in a Bacta tank. He literally had his back sliced open with a lightsaber. So the fact that they've got him in this ridiculous-looking, puffy water suit is just... It really is just a huge failure on this movie. And another friggin' failure is, this is just a few hours after what happened with Kylo Ren, and he's already woken up. Now he's stumbling out of the medical bay in that stupid, ridiculous fucking looking suit, dripping water all over the place, and it's like, yep, Finn has now gone from most interesting character in these movies to bumbling comic relief. This is what I mean when I say that these people don't actually believe in the virtues that they're espousing to, because you would actually think that taking one of the main protagonists from the previous movie, who the only one that actually had a story arc in the previous movie, and making him into the bumbling, funny black man would actually be quite offensive. You would actually think that the people who actually try to espouse these virtues would know that to not do something like that, would actually be offended at doing something like that. But nope. Apparently, we're just bigoted because we have a problem with women and black people being in movies, regardless, right? Because that's how reality works, right? If anybody has a problem with a movie starring a woman or a black guy, then it obviously must be sexism or racism. Now next. So basically, Poe wakes up and he asks where Rey is. And now we talk about Rey. Like I said from the onset, the only reason that there's no time skip in this movie is because they wanted to do a joke. We see the aftermath of the scene with Rey handing Anakin's lightsaber to Luke, something he lost more than 30 years ago, and after all this time, she approaches him, hands it to him into his quivering, robotic hand. He stares at it, he slowly raises his head to look up at her, and then tosses the lightsaber over his shoulder and walks away in a huff. Luke Skywalker just threw away his father's lightsaber, the symbol of what represented Anakin Skywalker as the hero before he became Darth Vader. The gift that was given to him by his mentor and friend, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He just threw it away. I hope that you enjoyed that little laugh you supposedly got, Ruin, because I remember being in the theater. Nobody laughed when they saw that. In fact, I literally heard somebody in the audience go like, what the... Why did he... And people started mumbling, why did he do that? People didn't laugh. If you think that people laughed at that scene, Ryan, you've got another thing coming to you. And so, basically speaking, Luke goes back to his hut to complain and to basically be alone. He locks the door. He tells Rey to go away. Chewie has to break down the door, and he's excited to see Chewie, but then he's like, where's Han? And I'm just left thinking, you don't know? You didn't sense it? So that's going to play into the plot later on. The idea that Luke has basically cut himself off from the Force. Which is cool. I admit that I had an idea of something like that being possible, but it's undone far too easily in the movie. But we'll get to that. So, the biggest problem of this movie is that the movie basically believes that subverting expectations just for the sake of shocking the audience is somehow good storytelling. A twist only works if it actually makes the movie better. If a twist in your movie actually makes the movie worse, you know what that movie ends up being? It ends up being written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. That's how badly you fucked up at that point. As far as I'm concerned, Ryan, you should have put the name Alan Smithy at the beginning of this, because this movie is literally going to haunt your career forever. And if it weren't for the fact that basically Hollywood is being run by like-minded, woke, individual, virtue-signaling phonies like you literally would not ever work in Hollywood again. And that's why Hollywood needs to be destroyed, because it's lost perspective on what it's supposed to be doing. Because now, it doesn't matter about making good movies or good entertainment, it's all about appearing to be virtuous at cocktail parties. As long as they can pretend that they have virtue and basically get to look down their noses at people who don't have virtue. They don't care. They don't care about fucking anything. I mean, at this point, they'll have more than enough money than they'll ever need. And yet they have the nerve to complain about capitalism. We'll get to that. Fucking champagne socialists, everybody. They're about it. The future Joseph Stalins of this world. Anyways, now we can basically start talking about the actual problems of this movie instead of going over the plot. Like I said, this movie disrespects Leia. Now, truth be told, by this point, with Carrie Fisher having died, I expected Leia to die in this movie. Because you can't use her for part 3. You can't use her for the next movie. You might as well kill her off and preserve Luke so that he can basically die in the next movie. So that Luke can basically, have a whole lot more stuff to do. I'm sorry, but that's just the reality that you're facing at this point. But then, basically, after a complete bitch scene where Kylo Ren has a meeting with Supreme Leader Snoke, I gotta say that they tried to make Snoke more distinct from Palpatine this time, in literally the worst kind of way, because they feature Supreme Leader Snoke wearing shimmering golden robes. And I gotta admit, that's actually a reference to what George Lucas originally wanted to do with the Emperor. Before the Emperor was actually a Sith Lord that was in control of Lord Vader the entire time, he was just gonna be a politician that was manipulated by the mega corporations of the galaxy into creating an empire in which they ruled. He was going to originally be depicted walking around wearing shimmering gold robes. But you know what? Lucas changed his mind, because he recognized that was a stupid idea. Basically speaking, when I see Supreme Leader Snoke walking around in golden robes like this, I keep expecting at any moment to hear him say, "I love gold! I love gold so much I even lost my genitalia in an unfortunate smelting accident. Hence the name Goldmember. Solid gold." Seriously, Snoke shouldn't be the villain of this movie. He should be over at the Disco Studio 69 and rollerblades. The roller buggy has made me sweaty. So anyway, he has that meeting with Kylo Ren, pointing out how pathetic Kylo Ren is because he lost to a girl who never held a lightsaber before. That's what I fucking hate about this movie. The fact that they are apparently listening to our criticisms, but they're doing it in a completely condescending way. It's like, oh, good. The bad guys are the ones who agree with you. Fuck you, bigot. Literally speaking, Snoke tells him to take off his mask and whatnot to reveal the scar underneath. And basically, the scene literally goes on to explain that Kylo Ren is literally just a boy cosplaying as Darth Vader, pretending that by being Vader, he's somehow going to be tougher than what he is. It's like, yeah, anyone with a brain picked up on that by watching the first movie. So Kylo gets so upset. And what's weird is the fact that the end of the last movie ended with Snoke saying that it's time to complete Kylo Ren's training, and he ordered him to kill his father as a means of testing whether or not he's ready to complete the training. Except this completion of training never occurs, because literally speaking, Snoke's attitude on Kylo has completely changed from the end of the last movie, because he killed his father, Han Solo, and yet somehow or another, instead of engulfing him in the dark side, it split his soul in two. Movie, quit pretending that Kylo Ren is somehow complex. He isn't. Actions show complexity to a character. All you have are words. Show him being conflicted. So, Kylo Ren leaves, he smashes his Vader-esque mask in an elevator. Yeah, I'm sure that plot point will have significant relevance throughout the rest of the franchise. I'm sure he'll come into his own as a legitimate character, that stands completely on his own. Wah, wah. And then, basically speaking, he gets into a ship, some kind of TIE advanced stealth fighter or whatnot. He ends up flying out towards the rebel ships, and he's blowing up fools left and right. And basically, he's receiving transmissions that the turbo cannons of the First Order Star Destroyer can't cover him. And I'm just left thinking, what's even the point? Like, the Resistance is barely putting up a fight. Why the heck do they need to cover him from that distance? He has his own deflector shields, and he has the Force. He can easily dodge anything. So he's blowing up fools left and right, and he basically flies towards the bridge of the ship, planning to blow it up, and he senses that Leia is on the bridge, and he has a moment of hesitation, where he decides not to blow up the bridge and kill his own mother. And you know what, movie? That is good. That is you actually showing the conflict within him. If you had actually shown that in the last movie, like, say, he had an opportunity to kill Han Solo before, like during the Battle of Takodana, but hesitated and refused to kill him, or intentionally missed so that Solo could get away, that would be good. That would actually show the conflict of this character. But instead, you saved it for here, when we know that he's not conflicted. And you want to know how else we know? This scene is a cheat. This scene is not legitimate. This scene of him refusing to kill his mother is only in the movie because of the agenda. Because of the fact that it's perfectly okay for him to kill his father because his father was a deadbeat, but no, not okay for him to kill his mother. It's never okay for you to kill your mother, is it? Effectively speaking, that's the only reason that Leia didn't get killed by Kylo Ren, because she's a woman. And yet, surprisingly, the movie tried to subvert my expectations again. It had the nerve to do that, by basically, like, showcasing that after Kylo refuses and banks off of blowing up the bridge, another ship comes in and blows it up for him. So it's like, well, that was pointless. Thanks for the 2 seconds of tension there, movie. Thanks for that big, radical moment in which we were supposed to actually feel the conflict of this character that now boils down to just absolutely nothing. This is legitimately the point where the movie literally just... It's the point where the movie lost me. Where I basically realized that there's literally nothing that this movie can do to salvage itself at this point. This is the point where suspension beyond all disbelief had been completely broken. Okay, so... Leia gets sucked out into outer space, along with Admiral Akbar, which I actually feel more sorry for him than I do for her in this situation. We're supposed to be given pause for this scene because it's literally the movie playing on our expectations, saying that, yes, we know that Carrie Fisher is gone, this is how we end Princess Leia. And we have this scene where we see her frozen corpse floating out in outer space. At which point, she opens her eyes, like this is fucking Guardians of the Galaxy all of a sudden, and she uses the Force to literally fly herself back onto the ship. And the worst part about it is how awkward it looks. She literally looks like Mary Poppins while she is doing this, and that's why people have dubbed this scene as Carrie Poppins. And I'm just left thinking, what? What the actual fuck? So many things to say about it. Where do I begin? Where do I fucking begin? Literally speaking, watching that scene in theaters, you guys remember that moment from the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie, At World's End, where Jack is basically trapped in Davy Jones' locker, and he's trying to move the Black Pearl. He gives up and lies down in the desert when suddenly all of Tia Dalma's little crab minions, they start moving the Black Pearl for him, and the look on his face is so dumbfounded when he sees the fact that his ship is moving on its own and he has no explanation for it. The look on his face is so iconic that that's the look on my face that I had when I watched Princess Leia fly herself back onto the ship after being blasted out into space. It's literally like, my sister even looked over at me and saw the look on my face, just like, yep. I literally, the thing about it is, I was having a problem with my allergies, at the time, because of the cats and everything at my sister's place. My sister gave me an allergy pill to help me feel better, and I literally leaned over to her and said, "What was in that pill you gave me?" Because I couldn't believe what I was actually seeing on screen, so... oh... Because that scene, it's literally indefensible. You might make the argument that it might be possible that through the Force, someone could survive the vacuum of space, but Leia looked like she was unconscious. The Force requires a great deal of concentration, and you kind of can't concentrate when a huge explosion happens behind you, and then an all-encompassing vacuum sucks you out into space. And your body is literally freezing. I refuse to believe that she would have the concentration to save herself through the Force. Hell, I'm not even sure how her body froze over like that. Shouldn't the depressurization of, going from an oxygenated atmosphere to going into a completely non-oxygenated vacuum completely suck all the oxygen out of her body at once to where she'd basically kind of her internal system would kind of collapse in on itself, and her body would pretty much implode from the inside out? Whew. Mm. Mm. The worst part about it is that the movie is expecting us to believe something that had never been established. And the worst part about it is that we could honestly get behind it if it weren't for the politics that went into this movie. All they would have needed is one line of dialogue in the previous movie. One line of dialogue. But they didn't do that. I'll elaborate more on this in the next movie, but I'm sorry, but there's no reason for why we should believe that Leia had any kind of adequate training with the Force to where she would actually be able to do this to save herself. And the next movie makes this literally even worse. We're literally just supposed to believe that she can do this with the Force because she's a woman. That's literally how they defend it. It's like, oh, you believe that a woman can't use the Force the way a man could? It's literally like, no, we can't believe that someone who hasn't been trained to use the Force can actually use the Force to do something like this. One of the hardest parts of writing any kind of series involving the use of magic is trying to create tension. You have to restrain the magic as much as possible, because if the magic can do literally anything, then there's no reason to feel any sort of tension. There's no reason to be invested in the characters, believing that they might get killed or whatever. Take, for example, J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling, when she wrote The Prisoner of Azkaban, made a huge mistake by introducing the concept of time travel into the Harry Potter universe. It was a mistake that was so bad, she literally had to write an excuse as to why they couldn't just use time travel to solve all their problems in the 5th book by literally destroying all of the time travel devices in the entire world. So it's like, yeah, we had time travel, but all the devices that allow us to time travel have been destroyed, and there's no way we can possibly build more or recover them. The secret of time travel is lost, so quit questioning it. Just give me your money. You basically have to establish limits on what your magic can do and what it can't do. Like in Fairly Odd Parents, that show used to be good because of the rules. It used to show that Timmy couldn't just get out of any situation by just wishing it away. He had to basically be mindful. He had to think about the situation before like making too many hasty decisions. He had to actually be clever in order to get out of certain situations. But then, by the time the show ended, the rules basically meant nothing. They literally could just be bent and broken in any way, shape, or form, even to the point where the plot wasn't even all that necessary. We're literally speaking like if the characters couldn't use magic to where, because they had recently lost their wands, a character like has their wand in a completely out of context scene. Okay, so now you can't just basically make the Force into any sort of Deus Ex Machina. You can't just basically have the Force save someone's life like this. It's not fair, and it's disrespectful. And worst of all, it's disrespectful to Carrie Fisher's memory because this scene shouldn't have been in the movie. If Ryan didn't have the balls to actually kill off Princess Leia in this movie, then this scene should not have been in the movie at all, because it's literally disrespectful to Carrie Fisher's memory, because everybody who's watching this movie is assuming that this is how Princess Leia dies, and you're just dangling it in front of them like your keys, like dangling keys in front of a toddler. You're basically subverting expectations. I hope that matters to you, Ryan, because you're a piece of shit, garbage human being who literally just should not have any sort of respect whatsoever. You are disrespecting a dead woman's legacy. You are literally using her as a puppet at this point. You, sir, have no shame, and therefore you have no honor. Worst of all, Ryan Johnson, you have vanity, but you do not have self-respect. There is a difference between the two. Because if you actually did have self-respect, you would actually recognize your flaws. You would recognize your faults. Instead, you simply deflect any criticism and blame your faults on other people. You are a disgrace, sir. A complete and utter disgrace. So, Leia survives, and she wills herself back onto the ship, and she opens up an airlock, which quite frankly should have sucked her and a whole lot of other people back out into space, because the other side of that airlock is damaged. There's no fucking way she could actually cycle the air back in when the other side of the airlock is fucking as damaged as it is. So, she basically is saved, but she's in a coma. So she might as well be dead for the rest of the movie. Well, I actually kind of prefer it that way. And she gets replaced with Laura Dern. Laura fucking Dern, playing Vice Admiral Holdo. Because they killed off Admiral Akbar and Poe has been demoted, Vice Admiral Holdo now is in command of the Resistance. I'm going to say it right now. Holdo is literally the most blatant example of how the agenda inspired this movie. And worst of all, she is literally the worst written character in this movie. Because everything that we know about filmmaking and storytelling is telling us that she is meant to be an antagonist. Not just an antagonist, but a villain. Everything about the movie is showing us that she was originally written to be a First Order spy. Because somehow or another, the fleet is jumping through hyperspace, but the First Order is able to follow them in order to basically pinpoint exactly where they end up going, so now the Resistance can't get away from them. And worst of all, they're running out of fuel, so they can't use hyperdrive to jump out of there, because then the First Order will be completely on them. Okay, the technology to track someone through hyperspace is impossible. It does not exist. You would literally have to have a beacon that could track a ship across the entire galaxy, because it's literally impossible to determine where, in which direction, and what point in the galaxy the ship that you're tracking will go, where they could come out. Hell, there are several ships. Why wouldn't they just split up? They only have one machine that can track the light speed signature, apparently. They can only pursue one ship. I'm sorry, but that kind of technology doesn't exist. It would be a whole lot easier to accept that somebody with purple hair, mind you, actually had a tracking beacon on their person that was leading the First Order right to them the entire time. Now, I want to basically focus on complaining about Holdo because she might as well be Vice Admiral Gender Studies. That's literally what she is. She's literally nothing more than a friggin' SJW that colors her hair a radical color and disrespects the men around her. Literally speaking, Poe literally presents himself to basically help in any way, shape, or form because he is a highly respected officer in this Resistance force, and she rebuffs him like he's a complete nobody. Yeah, all because he got demoted a few minutes ago. Yeah, he got demoted despite the fact that he's the guy that destroyed Starkiller Base. Woman, you should be accepting this guy's advice, regardless of what your agenda tells you to do. Worst of all, despite the fact that Poe got demoted, he is still an officer in the Resistance, which means that he actually is required to be kept in the loop. He is a part of the chain of command, which means that he has to be made aware of what is going on. The fact that you try to cut him out of the loop entirely shows your ineptitude as a leader, woman. But the worst part about it is, it shows that Holdo had no plan. Her plan is literally stupid, and here's why. Basically speaking, they're running out of fuel. We'll get to the fuel in a minute. The fuel can only basically keep them just far enough ahead of the First Order and to keep their shields going in order to prevent them from destroying their ships. Her plan is to siphon off the fuel from the main ship into smaller transports so that people could get away. That's a dumb plan. That literally should have resulted in everyone getting killed, which it did. We'll get to that later. Now, the whole idea of the fuel in Star Wars, yes, there is fuel in Star Wars. Ships do require fuel. Smaller ships, like fighters and whatnot, those require fuel. But you know what the huge cruisers, the ones that are basically like big battleships, like the one that you're currently on, require? They don't require fuel. All of their energy comes from an internal onboard reactor. So effectively speaking, your ship, you basically like made this entire argument about fuel when literally it's the most unbelievable thing about this entire movie. Your ship should have a reactor that's providing all of the power for your engines. Why the hell do you even need fuel to begin with? Secondly, you're moving at a pace in which the First Order can't catch up with you when they themselves don't have a problem with fuel because their Star Destroyers are actually using reactors? Why wouldn't they just increase their speed or get in front of you? More importantly, why wouldn't they just use their hyperdrives to get in front of you and attack you from the front? Literally box you in. Also, apropos to nothing, Snoke's Supremacy Star Destroyer, it looks stupid. It looks like a gigantic fucking boomerang. So you remember how I basically keep saying that if ever you have a twist in your movie that actually makes the plot of your movie worse, it might as well be directed by M. Night Shyamalan? Basically speaking, this is one of the examples of this movie basically going out of its way to make itself worse. This is the longest Star Wars movie that has ever been made. It's 2.5 hours long. So it legitimately has no excuse for being this long when when half an hour of this movie is given over to a plot point, an entire subplot that literally does nothing for the plot. Effectively speaking, if this subplot did not occur in the movie, nothing about the movie would be different. So, basically speaking, because Finn is worried about Rey and doesn't want her to come back, knowing that she'll immediately be walking into a trap, he decides to desert the Resistance, even though he never technically joined the Resistance. He basically was only just in it to get away from the First Order and to rescue Rey. So, basically speaking, he decides to desert, at which point the bane of my friggin' existence shows up in this movie. I stand by what I say when Holdo is the worst written character in this movie, but at least she actually contributes something to the plot. This character is effectively only just marginally not as bad as Holdo, but she doesn't contribute anything to the plot. She might as well be superfluous. In fact, you might as well replace her character with a bag of potatoes that the characters can carry around and basically use as a ventriloquist dummy that gets all offended and triggered and needs to virtue signal about various things. Because that's effectively what this character is. We are introduced to Rose Tico, played by Kelly Marie Tran. I gotta admit, Kelly Marie Tran is actually quite the looker. So it just goes to show how badly how far the agenda of this movie is going, when basically you take one of the best looking actresses in your movie and you ugh her up like this. Like, seriously, like, ugh. Get that girl a haircut. Get her some kind of hair net or something. Friggin' take away those baggy clothes and give her something that actually fits her. So, Rose Tico is down, inspecting the escape pods, being all sad about the fact that her sister is dead, her sister being the girl in the completely stupid bombing scene from the opening of the movie, and now she's basically, like, crying to herself right around the time that Finn is preparing to pile into an escape pod and leave. And yet, they legitimately have this scene where Rose basically fangirls all over Finn, basically saying that he's a hero of the Resistance. And this is one of the reasons why the movie doesn't work, because effectively only a few hours have passed since the events on Starkiller Base. How could word of what Finn did have possibly spread around to the point where he's a hero of the Resistance? Are you guys understanding, like, what I'm saying right now? It doesn't make any fucking sense. So, she is just fangirling all over him until she realizes that he's trying to leave in an escape pod. Then at which point she tasers his ass and takes him back, I don't know, in order to basically receive justice. And that's just basically a huge metaphor for this scene, for this entire trilogy. Men being portrayed as cowards and women being the strong, overbearing righteous overlords that need to keep men in line. Fuck you, movie. So basically, when he tries to explain himself that he doesn't want Rey to come back into this trap, he basically realizes that the First Order has the technology to track them through light speed, and he reveals what that technology is. How convenient. It was bad enough that he knew that Starkiller Base was because he was the janitor for Starkiller Base, but now he also knows what the friggin' space lightspeed tracking technology is because he was the janitor on Snoke's ship as well. This guy, he really gets around, doesn't he? He's literally just plot convenience. Hell, literally, I was expecting at some point in the third movie that there was going to be like an explanation that, oh, I was actually the janitor on the Sith planet of Exegol. I know exactly how to get there and what we need to do in order to defeat Emperor Palpatine. But we'll get to that when we get to that. So, basically, because Holdo has her head up her ass, just like Ryan Johnson, she's not listening to any she's not listening to anything that Poe Dameron or any of the like have to say about what's going on with what they should be doing, instead of basically like waiting, biding their time, waiting for the fuel to run out. So, basically, they concoct a plan that if somebody can sneak onto the Snoke ship, the Supremacy, at least I think that's what it's called, and basically disable the hyperdrive tracking system, they can get on a ship, get back to the fleet can make a jump to hyperspace, and the First Order wouldn't be able to follow them, because they wouldn't be able to know where they were going. Except they need a master hacker in order to do this, so they contact Maz Kanata. And I just love this scene. This scene basically like showcased to me that she wasn't going to be relevant to this trilogy at all. Like, literally speaking, her entire role in this movie is to say, sorry, I can't help, but I know someone who can. So, she gives them, basically, she tells them to go find a master code breaker who is usually seen at the casinos on Canto Bight. Considering that Canto Bight in and of itself is supposed to be a gigantic casino planet, I really think that it's kind of like a bit of a... they're gonna need a bit more of a description than that. They need to like have a specific casino that he frequents. And instead of giving them the name of this person and maybe like bringing up like a hologram projection of what he looks like, she just basically tells him to look for his symbol. He wears a badge just like this, and that's all that she feels the need to tell them. So, thus begins the most pointless plot subplot in movie history. Like, literally speaking, I have seen subplots that don't tie into the movie at all, that are more meaningful than this, because this entire subplot is literally just propaganda. And it's bad propaganda. It's the kind of propaganda that you think that countries are smart enough to not actually showcase, but nope. It's literally like so stupid. They are so confident that people are going to just accept this blatant propaganda message that they are just so friggin' arrogant that their extremist views might not be the norm. Effectively speaking, they think that they are somehow the norm, but they are not. Okay, so they fly to Canto Bight, and they make a whole lot of anti-capitalist tripe. I just love it. Disney, the company that people immediately point to when they talk about evil corporations and the dangers of a capitalist society, is somehow espousing the vices of capitalism and the virtues of socialism. How capitalism is evil and needs to be brought down, because all capitalism really is a bunch of rich people who run the corporations gambling away with money, like money is somehow a toy or something. Playing with money, yeah, that's what capitalism is. Capitalism totally isn't the free exchange of ideas and marketplace values, a free market, free enterprise, where anybody who has an idea can become an entrepreneur, market their ideas, and sell their ideas, and make money. Nope. That's all capitalism is to these people. Just rich people getting richer and exploiting the people who don't have anything. The haves versus the have-nots. And apparently this planet Canto Bight also employs slave labor, despite the fact that you basically know from the from the prequel trilogy that most of the Republic had outlawed slave labor. The Empire had brought it back. Are you seriously telling me that the New Republic didn't outlaw slavery? Like, what is the good? What good did this New Republic even remotely do? Was the New Republic ever even a thing? If you're gonna pretend like nothing has changed, why even bother of having a New Republic? So, basically speaking, this scene only exists so that Finn can get excited about all the cool gambling and all the money that's being thrown around, so that Rose Tico can pretend to be all virtuous about how disgusting this place is, how she wished that she could ram her fist through this place. Yeah, Rose, I've got an idea of what somebody can do with their fist involving you, and it's not going to be pleasant from either end. So effectively speaking, they try to contact the Master Codebreaker because they spot him at a roulette table. And that's one of the things I just basically think is just kind of odd about Star Wars franchise. That Star Wars franchise is going to have, references and nods to, real-world stuff and whatnot. There was such a thing as gambling in the Star Wars universe, like in the original trilogy, and especially like in the expanded universe, like the comic books and even like the Clone Wars series. But the idea that gambling is seen as this upscale kind of thing in which everybody is wearing a fancy tuxedo and only the absolute richest of the rich are in it. Where are all the desperate people that are trying stupidly to try and win the house? Where are all the real people? Because I see these people, all these rich people in tuxedos, I see the fat opera alien woman singing, and I don't believe that it's real. Where are all the real people that are supposed to be here? You do realize that gambling is not only for the super rich, right? Gambling is a system that preys on the desperate. That's how people like Jabba the Hutt make their money, by basically promoting gambling so that people who are desperate lose their shirts on it. So, where are all those people? Why is it that it's only rich people that are bad here? So, because they parked their ship on a beach, the beach that quite frankly no one should even fucking care about, they get arrested and thrown in jail, where they come across Benicio del Toro, who is only known as DJ, a guy that basically means don't join. He apparently is a master codebreaker, just like the guy they came here to get. But they can't get the guy they came here to get, so they have to so they decide to go with fucking DJ instead. Yeah, because this guy who is in jail looks totally trustworthy, am I right? So, they get out on DJ's ship, they start heading back towards the fleet and whatnot. During a completely stupid escape scene, I might add, in which they decide to basically make a statement about animal cruelty. You see, they have this problem with the fact that the part of the gambling rink here on Canto Bight is they have a horse race track, and basically the animals here are being mistreated because they're being forced to race, and people bet on them for money. Yeah. So basically it's like that thing that's automatically if an animal is basically being exploited for entertainment, it's automatically abuse, right? They need to get past this narrative because horses that compete in race trials, hell, horses that are literally trained to be riding horses are not being abused. They're not being abused. The worst that you basically say about them is that they're being domesticated. But nope, you gotta have basically this narrative about how the innocent horses are being exploited and and you gotta make the horses look so cute and marketable so that they can make toys out of them. So, basically speaking, in this exact same scene, we see examples of animal cruelty and human slavery. Not just human slavery, child slavery as well. And what do our heroes, Rose, Tico, and Finn, virtue signalers to the stars, decide to do about it? They decide to free all of the animals, which are easily going to be recaptured by their handlers once they leave, and instead leave the human slave children there to rot. So yeah, you don't get to sit on your pedestal pretending to be all virtuous as you signal from on high about how virtuous you are when you literally left children enslaved. You left slave children to their enslavement. And these people are supposed to be our heroes, ladies and gentlemen. So, so they escape on Poe Dameron's ship, and during the trip back to rejoin the fleet, as in the plot of the movie, you basically have the movie once again trying to virtue signal, and here's one of the worst parts about it. This virtue signal is actually one of the themes of the Star Wars franchise that this movie pretends that it's the first movie to ever actually talk about, but it doesn't. It isn't. This is literally just the movie smelling its own asshole again, because this is the movie once again virtue signaling. The fact that they stumbled onto this being a major plot theme of the entire franchise, it's all a coincidence. The simple fact is that one of the main themes about this Star Wars narrative is the fact that both sides kind of fuel the conflict. That was one of the points of the prequel trilogy. The fact that the Republic had fallen under corruption and literally fueled the war machine just as much as the Separatists did. The Separatists were under corruption too. Like, there were actually legitimate people that wanted to secede from the Union who were willing to talk about this peacefully if they would just be recognized as their own sovereign authority. But nope. The friggin' megacorporations came in and decided we're gonna use this as an opportunity to make money off of our war profiteering. So the fact is, DJ basically goes into that whole, both sides are just as bad because the Republic has to buy ships from weapons dealers just as much as the First Order does. The only way to actually succeed is to not join. Except it's a completely different situation because all of the Imperial ships come from Imperial-controlled factories, so the idea that they're buying from the same people is laughable. In fact, most of the ships that the Rebel Alliance had to use were decommissioned at that point. They literally had to slap together their Y-Wing fighters from pieces of decommissioned Y-Wing models. And literally speaking, after the rebellion won the war, their version of the sleek-down, slimmer Y-Wing that didn't have much armor actually became so popular that the manufacturers actually started making them again. So it's like, yeah, this entire narrative is bullshit. But the simple fact is, that was one idea that I could get behind if they weren't so bad at conveying the idea. Because I actually had a feeling that what if the Star Wars galaxy was being controlled? What if it was being controlled by a being so much larger and so much more powerful than the Force that it actually was pitting the light and the dark side of the Force against each other in order to create a perpetual conflict? Unfortunately, when you take the meta-narrative into account, you realize that Force is actually Disney. Ugh. So, the Force, so basically, our little ragtag group of people are basically flying towards the First Order fleet. They DJ somehow is the master codebreaker that he claims he is. He deactivates the regulatory shield that allows them to land on the ship. They end up stealing a few uniforms. They manage to disguise BB-8 as a trash can. And I'm just left thinking, if BB-8 is the thing that gets them caught, why wouldn't they just leave him on the ship? Why wouldn't they have just left him on the ship or in hiding someplace where he would not be recognized? But that's a stupid thing. It's the fact that they recognize BB-8 as not being in a First Order droid, because droids aren't really all that noticeable in this galaxy. I guess that was one of the things that Ruin Johnson thought that he was fixing about this galaxy, but it turns out he was just breaking it yet again. Okay, so they land on the ship, they disguise themselves as First Order officers. Apparently, the thing that should have gotten them caught is the fact that Rose Tico is a woman, because apparently the First Order is nothing more than a blatant reference to the tyrannical white supremacist patriarchy. So how could they ignore the fact that a woman is dressed like an Imperial officer? So they get to the machine, they try to deactivate it, but it turns out a black version of BB-8, a BB-8 unit that is programmed by the First Order, spotted them because BB-8 is literally a rolling trash can. Yeah, you don't even need to basically figure out that he's a spy underneath. That right there looks suspicious enough. The fact that they take a trash can, they turn it over and cover BB-8 with it. And who so happens to be alive and there to apprehend them than Captain fucking Phasma? Yeah, the character that literally did nothing in the last movie and literally was put in a situation where no one realistically would come and rescue her, where it was almost certain that she would die. Yeah, she's alive in this movie. No explanation. No throwaway line that's saying that, fortunately, I have all the access codes to the trash compactors on Starkiller Base. You literally wasted your time throwing me in there. So, now they've captured them, and fucking the First Order is getting ready to execute them. Now I can basically talk about fucking Holdo, because it turns out that Holdo's plan is fucking stupid. Her plan is to siphon off all the fuel into the smaller transports so that the people on the ship can get away so that they can escape the First Order. And my question is, 1, if you had done that, if this had been your plan, why couldn't you have told Poe about that? 2, if this was your plan, why did you wait for this long to where 2 of your other ships had been destroyed in order to do this? 3rd, and most importantly, you are literally planning to evacuate this ship on smaller transports on the faint hope that the First Order isn't going to notice the several transport ships escaping your ship as it goes down. Effectively speaking, this is the Star Wars galaxy, where we can scan for ships and life forms in outer space. There's no excuse as to why the First Order shouldn't have been anticipating this. Effectively speaking, it's a dumb move, and Poe was right to hold her at gunpoint and charge her with mutiny. What he wasn't right in doing was he should have stunned her ass and had her hauled away to the brig. So he goes to the bridge in order to try and take control, and who should so happen to show up? Leia, of course, because being in a coma is just something you can recover from just a day. Hey, look at Finn, he recovered from a coma in just an hour. So, So basically speaking, she basically comes onto the bridge, she stuns Poe, and they take control of the bridge again. The worst part about it is that Poe led a mutiny, and they're treating that like it's just okay. Despite the fact that Poe was completely justified in starting this mutiny because he was right the entire time, the worst part about it is the condescending way that they treat Poe. Like he's a child. Like, they basically treat, like, Holdo and Leia basically treat him like they're his mom or his aunt or something. He really is a hothead. I like him. Fucking... This movie did a lot to destroy any respect that I once had for Laura Dern, so... I'm excited about seeing Sam Neill in Jurassic World 3 and Jeff Goldblum. Laura Dern, not so much. You're literally going to have to do a lot in order to actually regain my respect. Because your character in this movie, she's literally just a puppet, a prop, a mouthpiece. The worst part about it is that Holdo and Leia have this touching heart-to-heart goodbye moment, and we're supposed to feel something, despite the fact that we have no idea who Holdo is, and every single thing up until this moment in the movie was telling us she was going to be a First-Order spy. She basically parts with Leia saying, "May the Force be with you, always," blah. And she basically goes on, and she... What was I trying to say? What the fuck was I trying to say here? God. She basically decides to go down with the ship in order to keep the First Order focused on them. Okay, so... Back with the subplot on the ship. Basically speaking, like, what was it? Finn and Rose Tico are captured, not because BB-8 got spotted by the black version of himself. No, instead, it was actually DJ. He actually tipped off the First Order that they were coming and gave them up. And it's like, if that's the reason that they got caught, what was the point in even having, like, BB-8 get recognized by the black droid? So... DJ turns them in, and he gets a huge reward out of it. And I'm just left saying, so everything that they did with the plot on Canto Bight actively made the situation worse. So yeah, pointless. Should have been cut from the movie, because literally speaking, had they done literally nothing, the plot would not be any different. They would still be on a ship with a commander who didn't know what she was doing, and most of the resistance would have gotten killed anyway. So, and here's basically what I really get annoyed with. The fact that so many people who defend this movie say that, oh, DJ, he's gonna have a character arc. He's gonna come back in the next movie, and he's totally gonna redeem himself just like Lando did. Yeah, how'd that work out for you, kiddies? You really backed the wrong horse with this one. So, Captain Phasma decides that she's going to execute Finn and Rose, but she wants to make it hurt. So she has a couple of execution stormtroopers come up. You know they're execution stormtroopers because they have that black stripe across their helmets. And they come up, and they're wielding laser axes. Yeah, because there's nothing more painful than getting decapitated at the neck, which is only going to actually cause like a brief moment of pain before you die. Because effectively you'll be cut off from your central nervous system, and you won't be able to feel anything after that. Yeah, that's totally going to hurt. You might as well have brought up flamethrowers if you wanted to make it hurt. Anyways, then we get the scene that literally destroyed any kind of tension that the entire Star Wars saga could have once had, that completely destroyed the continuity of every single Star Wars space battle that has ever existed. We get the Holdo maneuver. Because at this point, you actually are kind of wondering, why the heck is she, like, why the heck would you basically, like, not use the main ship in order to put up a fight against the Star Destroyers so that the other ships can get away? Especially now that she realizes that all the fucking resistant ships are getting blown up because of her fucking plan. Yeah, it's not Rose, Tico, and Finn's fault. It's not their fault that DJ gave them up. It's your fault, because the idea that the First Order would not be anticipating that is not believable. So yeah, it's your fault, lady. The ships are getting blown. The people that are dying on those ships are dead because of you. So she decides that she's going to turn the ship around, and she's going to use the last bit of fuel that she has to make a hyperdrive jump through the First Order fleet, cutting through their ships and destroying them. That is a stupid maneuver, and it realistically would not work. And the worst part about it is the fact that by doing this, you are effectively destroying any tension that the previous movies could have had, because the Death Star has such has thick impenetrable armor that can't be penetrated by blasters. Well, why not just take a cruiser, put it on autopilot or something, and have it hyperdrive straight through the Death Star? There's no way it would be able to stop that, because an object literally going at the speed of light would pierce basically through anything. So yeah, with that one maneuver, you got your cool scene, JJ. But you completely destroyed the legacy of an entire franchise to do it. So, bravo. Bravo to you, sir. And the worst part about it is that I wanted Holdo to die so much because she is just a waste of a character. She's actually a waste of thought, a waste of breath, and the waste of an actress that I actually once respected. An actress that was from one of my all-time favorite franchises, although she was probably the weakest link about that movie, but I'll get to that later. The fact that she is such a disgraceful character, and yet she is given such an honorable death that she did not deserve, it's just not fair. It's not fucking fair, because she didn't deserve that death. She was originally written to be a First Order spy. I fucking guarantee it. But no, you can't have a woman being any kind of bad guy in these movies. Nope, she can't be evil, she can't be bad, she can't be manipulative. No, because women are the bastions and epitome of virtue. All women are queens. If she breathes, she's a thought! Why did the protagonist actually have the red lightsaber in that video? But anyway, the worst part about it is that someone actually did deserve to have a death like this. It was Admiral Akbar. You know, that guy from the original trilogy. It's a Trap guy, the guy that everybody loves, the guy that everybody was excited about seeing in The Force Awakens, thinking, that's the guy that really deserved to have this moment, because he's a character that we all know, he's a character that we have a long, nostalgic, emotional investment in, and yet you guys killed him off-screen by getting him sucked out into space the same way that Leia did. But Leia gets to survive because vagina. Nope. Akbar should have been the one that basically pulled that maneuver. He should have turned the ship around, and hyperdrived his way through the enemy fleet. But you want to know why they didn't do that? Because if they did, they would be accused of Islamophobia. Because of the name Akbar. Yep, you got a guy named Akbar doing a suicide bombing. Of course. It's all about virtue signaling, am I right? You gotta basically pretend that you're virtuous, even though you're defending people who aren't virtuous in the slightest. So, that basically destroys most of the First Order fleet. And that basically just... This entire subplot is basically pointless, because if Finn and Rose hadn't done anything, the entire movie literally would not change. You can't convince me that the First Order is incompetent enough to not have been sweeping the area for escaping ships. Literally speaking, like, Finn getting on that escape pod literally would have meant certain death, because effectively the First Order would have shot him out the moment that he ejected from the main ship. You see, that's a huge problem with these movies. You can't actually get us invested in the hero's plight if you make your villains so fucking incompetent. Okay, so I've been at this for a few hours now. I'm actually kind of tired. I'm a bit hungry, so I'm gonna split this rambly rant review into two parts, at least 2 parts, because I talked about, like, fucking Holdo. I've talked about, like, why Rian Johnson's view of Star Wars doesn't work. I've talked about, like, the stupid bombing scene at the beginning. I've talked about the stupid, pointless Canto Bight anti-capitalist subplot that literally only exists to basically just... and I've talked about the Holdo maneuver. So effectively speaking, I'm gonna basically, like, talk about the rest of the movie in part 2. Right now, I basically gotta rest my voice and, like, get something to eat. So, hope you guys managed to sit through this rambling mess, and hope you guys, like, will stick with me for part 2 coming tomorrow. Until then, later.